Hey there, name's Roy Hayes. I don't usually talk to strangers, but if you're here listening, I guess we're not strangers for long. This is the story of how my own daughter, flesh and blood, planned to put me in a nursing home, sell the house I built with my own hands, and pocket the cash. But she forgot one thing. I'm not as helpless as she thought. Before I tell you how it all went down, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss stories like this one. And if you're listening right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're from. I like knowing who's out there on the other end. All right, pull up a chair. Let me tell you exactly how I turned their plan on its head. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, the kind where the walls of my house seemed to sigh with the same loneliness I felt. I was scraping the last bits of chicken casserole from my plate when the phone rang. The caller ID flashed Caitlin, my daughter, my only child. Just seeing her name used to lift my spirits now, it felt like a hand squeezing my heart. Dad, how are you holding up? Her voice was warm, careful the kind she used when she thought I might be feeling low. Oh, you know me, I said, settling into Ellen's old recliner. The leather was worn to a soft shine from the years she'd sat there reading mystery novels, just finished dinner, and was about to watch the news. I didn't mention it was leftover casserole from 3 nights ago, or that I'd been staring at Ellen's picture on the mantel for over an hour before the phone rang. Are you eating enough? You could order groceries online. Remember, I showed you the app. I'm eating fine, I replied gently. Though I had a little scare yesterday, left the burner on under my coffee pot. Good thing I smelled it from the living room. There was a pause. I could picture the little crease forming between her eyebrows, the same one Ellen used to get when she was worried. Dad, maybe we should talk about someone checking in on you more often. Jeremy thinks I'm fine. I countered, changing the subject. How's the business trip? You're still in Phoenix? Yes, she said, but her laugh was short. Jeremy's been doing most of the client meetings. I've been stuck in presentations about digital marketing strategies. We talked a few minutes more about nothing in particular before she said she had to run dinner plans with potential investors. I told her I loved her. She said she loved me too. Then came the click of the call ending. Or so I thought. A moment later, rustling, muffled voices. I was about to hang up my end when her words froze me in place. Jeremy, you see how he's slipping. He left the stove on again. My chest tightened. It's time, Caitlin. Jeremy's voice said, calm and cold. He can't live alone. The house must be worth close to $1 million now. With the Denver market, at least $900,000, Caitlin replied quickly. We could sell it to find him a decent but not too expensive care home, and we'd finally have the money for that Boulder place with the mountain view. She laughed. Actually laughed. You should have seen him tonight. So grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea. My hand went numb. The phone slid from my fingers, clattering to the floor. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the hallway, Ellen's gift to me on our 15th anniversary. Outside, crickets began their evening chorus in the garden she'd planted, and I still tended. But the warmth I'd felt moments earlier was gone, replaced by something colder, sharper. They thought I was a burden, a problem to be managed. They were already planning my exile while spending the proceeds of my life's work. I looked at Ellen's picture on the mantel. Her eyes seemed to watch me holding a question I didn't yet have the answer to. Disappointment, warning. Maybe both. I rose slowly, the recliner creaking behind me. My legs felt heavy as I walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer with our old paperwork. My fingers found the folder without thinking. Tuition receipts, $48,000 over 4 years. Double shifts, concrete dust in my hair. Ellen's late-night coffee as she massaged my shoulders. Wedding receipts, $32,000 for one day. Caitlin swore she'd never forget. She had forgotten, just like she'd forgotten who co-signed her first car loan, who found her that marketing job after 8 months of unemployment. I found the statements from when Jeremy lost his job and they temporarily moved in with me. I'd paid the bills, covered groceries, never charged them rent. I'd even paid $3,000 for Jeremy's car repair, draining my emergency fund. Always with a smile. Always, Dad, you're the best. I climbed the stairs to the bedroom Ellen and I had shared. Still the same. Her jewelry box, her reading glasses, the original deed to our house bought in 1999, my name alone on it now. Standing there, I felt something shift. The hurt was still sharp, but beneath it, a harder resolve was forming. They thought I was too old to fight back. They were wrong. I pulled out a business card Ellen had insisted I keep years ago. Todd Fisher, real estate attorney. She'd wanted to be sure our affairs were in order if anything happened to her. I'd met him once. professional, quiet, the kind of man who got things done. I picked up the phone and stared at it for a long moment. The house we built together had been filled with love, sacrifice, and years of hard work. Now it was just a dollar sign to them, a ticket to their Mountain View dream. Well, if they wanted it that badly, I would make sure they could never have it. When I finally dialed, my hand was steady. "Mr. Fisher, this is Roy Hayes. I think it's time we had another consultation." The next morning, I put on the charcoal gray suit Ellen had chosen for me years ago. It wasn't my funeral suit, though the thought crossed my mind that Caitlin and Jeremy might have preferred I wore that one. I arrived at Todd Fisher's office 15 minutes early. His practice was on the second floor of a modest brick building, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. The receptionist recognized me. "Mr. Hayes, you can go right in. Mr. Fisher is expecting you." Todd rose from behind his desk when I entered, mid-50s graying at the temples, the kind of calm presence that made you feel your problems might actually have solutions. His handshake was firm but not overbearing. "Roy, I'm sorry we're meeting under difficult circumstances," he said as we sat. "I remember you and Ellen, good people." "Thank you," I replied. My voice was steady even though my insides felt like a twisted rope. He poured coffee for us both, then leaned forward. "So what's on your mind?" I told him everything. The phone call I wasn't supposed to hear, my daughter's cold calculation, Jeremy's easy cruelty, their plans for my house, my money, my life. Todd didn't interrupt, but his pen scratched steadily across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back. "Roy, this is more common than you'd think, but legally they can't touch your property. The deed is in your name alone, correct?" I nodded. "When Ellen passed, it transferred to me. Then your daughter and son-in-law have no claim to it. They can't sell it, can't force you into care, can't make decisions about your assets without your consent. Period." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. But then a sharper thought cut through the relief. So if I wanted to sell it myself, "You could. Tomorrow if you wanted," Todd said. "It's entirely your choice." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Denver market's good right now." He smiled faintly. "Good, Roy, it's on fire, especially for properties in established neighborhoods like yours. A house like yours, well-maintained, could sell in days, maybe to a cash buyer." My mind flashed to Caitlin's laughter, Jeremy's smug tone, and if I wanted to sell before they returned from their trip. "It's possible," Todd said. "I know buyers who can close in under 2 weeks, but once you sign, there's no going back." I met his eyes, I'm sure. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let me make some calls. I'll draw up the initial documents so you're ready if you decide to proceed." We spent the next hour going over market value estimates, timelines, legal requirements. His consultation fee was $200 I paid in cash. When I left, the spring air felt lighter. My truck door closed with a satisfying thunk, and for the first time since Ellen's death, I felt in control. As I drove home, my phone vibrated. Caitlin's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring until voicemail picked up. For once, she could wonder why her grateful old father wasn't scrambling to answer. That night, I sat in the kitchen laptop, open searching real estate agents Denver. The results were endless, but one name kept coming up, Brian Connor. Mid-40s clean cut, averaged just 18 days from listing to closing. Testimonials spoke of quick sales and smooth transactions. I stared at his direct number. This was the pivot point. Once I made the call, there would be no turning back to the man who said yes to everything Caitlin asked for. I dialed. "Brian Connor Real Estate," came the confident voice. "Mr. Connor, my name is Roy Hayes. I'm interested in selling my house quickly. How fast could that happen?" "With the right property, I've closed in 10 days, he said. "Tell me about your home." I described it 2-story, 3,400 square feet, built in 99 Cherry Creek area, custom work throughout, maintained to perfection. "That's exactly the kind of property my investors are looking for," he said, excitement clear in his tone. "Are you available this afternoon for a walkthrough?" 3 o'clock, I replied without hesitation. The hours until 3 passed in a blur of cleaning, not because it needed it, but because Ellen would have insisted. I polished the granite countertops she'd chosen for the way they caught the morning light. I dusted the bay window I'd built so she could read there in the afternoons. Each pass of the cloth reminded me why I was doing this. At 3 sharp, the doorbell rang. Brian was exactly like his photo professional, approachable eyes scanning every detail. "Wow," he said, stepping inside. "You've really maintained this place." "I built it right the first time," I said simply. He moved through the rooms like a man cataloging treasure crown, molding hardwood floors, custom cabinets. He stopped at the bay window. This is beautiful. Built it for my wife, I said quietly. She loved to read here. He nodded respectfully, then showed me comparable sales on his tablet. Similar homes in your area are going for $850,000 to $920,000. Given the condition and features, I'd price yours at $890,000. That'll move it fast. The number echoed in my head almost exactly what Caitlin had guessed. But this time, it wouldn't be hers. I have a group of cash buyers who'd be interested, Brian continued. No loans, no delays. They can close in 10 business days. When would I need to be out, I asked. 30 days after closing, but they're flexible. I thought of Caitlin's voice calling me sweet while plotting my exile. I looked at Brian. Let's do it. His professional smile widened into genuine enthusiasm. He made a call right there in my living room describing my house with the energy of a man who'd found exactly what his client wanted. By the end of the conversation, he had an appointment to bring me the initial contracts the next morning. That night, I walked through the house as if committing every inch to memory. Ellen's touch was everywhere. The curtains she'd sewn, the bookshelves, she'd filled the faint scent of her lavender sachets in the linen closet. My hand lingered on the mantel where her photo sat. They're not taking this from me, Ellen, I whispered. They'll never get the chance. The next morning, Brian returned with contracts, a notary, and coffee. I read every line, my engineer's mind scanning for flaws. Sale price, $890. Closing date, 10 business days. Minimal contingencies. 30 days to vacate. I signed without a tremor in my hand. When Brian left papers in his briefcase and a closing date on the calendar, I sat in the living room no longer as a man waiting for the inevitable, but as a man who'd just set the terms of his own future. And Caitlin and Jeremy had no idea the ground beneath them had already shifted. The first 3 days after signing the contract passed like a storm I'd quietly unleashed. Phone calls from Brian about inspection schedules, emails from Todd's office with title search updates, all routine, all on track. I followed each step with the same precision I once used to check blueprints. On the surface, life continued as normal. I mowed the lawn, waved to Mrs. Patterson next door, even attended Thursday morning coffee at the community center, but under it all was a countdown ticking in my mind. 10 business days until the sale closed. 8 days until Caitlin and Jeremy returned from Phoenix. They still believed I was at home, waiting aging quietly, ready to be moved into their chosen care facility. They had no idea their plans were already rubble. On day 4, the inspector arrived, a polite man in his late 30s named Marco. He stepped inside, looked at the floors, and let out a low whistle. "You maintain this yourself?" he asked. "Every inch," I said. He spent 2 hours moving through the house, noting things, testing outlets, running taps. At one point, he stopped in the kitchen, hand resting on the granite counter. "This isn't contractor grade," he said, running his fingers along the edge. "No," I replied. "It's husband grade. My wife picked the stone. I made it fit." He smiled faintly and went back to work. By the time he left, he'd found nothing worth mentioning. I overheard him tell Brian outside, "This is one of the cleanest inspections I've done all year." That night, I sat in Ellen's reading chair and considered my next steps. Selling the house was the core of the plan, but I needed to think beyond the sale. Where I would live, where I'd keep the money so Caitlin and Jeremy couldn't touch it, and most importantly, how I'd make sure they understood exactly what they'd lost. It couldn't just be about denying them the house. It had to be a message, one they'd never forget. Day 5. I began scouting apartments online. I wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere they'd never think to look. That's when I found Sunset Manor, a senior living complex, but not the kind with nurses and activities. This was independent living. Fully furnished units, a golf course, a small library, month-to-month leases. I bookmarked it. Day 6, I called the property manager. Her name was Mrs. Chen, voice warm, but all business. "We have a furnished 1-bedroom available immediately," she said. "Would you like to see it?" "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow morning." Day 7, I drove over. The place wasn't grand, but it was clean quiet. The kind of place where you could choose whether to speak to your neighbors or keep to yourself. Mrs. Chen walked me through the unit. Neutral walls, sturdy furniture, a balcony looking out over a small park. "It's available now," she said. "Month to month is fine, but we require first month's rent and a security deposit." I handed her the cash without hesitation. Nearly $3,000 gone in a heartbeat, a sum that would have made me think twice before. Now it was simply the cost of freedom. "I'll move in the day after closing," I told her. Day 8. Brian called. "Everything's cleared. Buyers are satisfied. We're set for closing Friday morning." That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Ellen's photo in front of me. I imagined her sitting across from me like she used to, a cup of tea in her hand. "I hope you'd approve," I said aloud. "They wanted to make me disappear. Now they're the ones who'll be left with nothing." The house felt different now. Not the warm, lived-in home Ellen and I had built, but a stage set for the final act of a long play. Each room would soon be someone else's memory. I took one last slow walk through the upstairs bedrooms, pausing at Caitlin's old room. The yellow walls, the photos from high school still tucked in the mirror frame. She had once been my little girl who ran into my arms when I got home from work. Now she was a woman who'd called me a burden. Day 9, I began packing. Just essentials. Ellen's jewelry box, the wedding photo, the cookbook with her handwriting in the margins, my engineering certificates, a few clothes. I told myself I'd travel light leave the rest for the new owners. Mrs. Patterson saw me carrying a box to my truck, moving some things to storage, I told her. It wasn't entirely a lie. I had rented a small storage unit for some of the items I couldn't take to the apartment. But mostly, I didn't want anyone knowing the truth until it was too late. Day 10, closing day, dawned bright and cloudless. I wore the navy suit Ellen had bought me for Caitlin's college graduation. The title company was efficient, the buyer's attorney brisk. I signed each page carefully. $897 cash. The wire transfer confirmed before I left the building. Walking back to my truck, I felt lighter. The house was no longer mine. The chains Caitlin and Jeremy thought they had wrapped around me were gone. I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I drove to a small coffee shop I liked and sat by the window watching the street. I thought about what would happen in 3 days when Caitlin and Jeremy pulled into the driveway. They'd expect to walk inside, start sorting Dad's things, maybe measure the place for their new furniture. Instead, they'd find new locks. And a note. I'd already drafted it in my mind. Not angry, not vulgar, just the truth written in the careful script Ellen had always admired. A message that would cut deeper than any shout ever could. That evening, I went back to the house, still legally allowed to be there for 30 days, and made my final preparations. I called an emergency locksmith, paid him cash, watched him replace the brass locks Ellen had chosen with modern silver ones that clicked with a sharper sound. "These are good," the locksmith said, handing me the new keys. "Nobody's getting in without them." Exactly. I walked through the now empty living room and pictured Caitlin's face when her key didn't work. Pictured Jeremy's smugness crumbling when he read my note. In the quiet, I set Ellen's photo on the mantel one last time. "This is for you," I whispered. Then I locked the new lock, slid the key into my pocket, and walked out into the cooling evening, the countdown now reduced to 3 days, until the truth would hit them like a hammer. Saturday morning, the first full day after closing the house, felt different, in a way I couldn't quite explain. The papers were signed, the wire transfer was sitting safely in my account, and yet I still had access to the front door. 30 days of legal occupancy, plenty of time to set the stage. I had a plan now, and the last pieces needed to fall into place. First, the surveillance. I'd spent the night researching miniature cameras. Some were disguised as smoke detectors, others as picture frames. But the one that caught my attention was simple. A phone charger with a hidden lens, Wi-Fi enabled, motion activated, and capable of live streaming directly to my phone. Small enough to be overlooked, sharp enough to capture every detail. By 9 a.m., I'd placed an expedited order. $149 plus $40 for overnight shipping, a tiny price for the satisfaction it promised. After breakfast, I drove to Sunset Manor to finalize the move-in date. Mrs. Chen met me in her neat, tidy office. "Mr. Hayes," she greeted, "the apartment is ready whenever you are. Keys, lease, and utilities can all be in your name by Monday." "Monday works perfectly," I told her. We went through the final paperwork. Month-to-month lease. No restrictions on visitors. The unit's furnishings were modest but practical. A small dining table, a couch, a bed. I would add little touches, later things that belonged to me and Ellen, to make it feel less like a rental and more like a choice. By the time I left, I was holding my new keys in my palm. 2 sets, one for me, one for no one else. On my way home, I stopped at the bank where the sale funds now rested, Colorado Community Bank. A small institution, the kind Ellen always preferred, because you could walk in and speak to a person rather than an automated machine. David Morrison, the private banking manager, met me in his office. We reviewed the account again, high-yield interest premium level fraud alerts, transfer limits set to require my in-person approval. I explained without giving specifics that the money was for my future and my future alone. Understood, David said. And I assure you, Mr. Hayes, your funds are secure here. Leaving the bank, I felt something I hadn't in years, absolute financial control, not just over my money, but over who could touch it, which was no one but me. Sunday afternoon, the FedEx truck rolled up outside my house. The driver handed me a small brown box. Inside was my camera. I read the instructions twice, then tested it in the kitchen. The video feed was crystal clear. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards when I stepped. I carried it to the front hall and plugged it into the outlet near the door. On my phone, I adjusted the angle until the entire entryway was visible from the welcome mat to the coat hooks on the wall. Perfect. Next, the note. I sat at the kitchen table with a sheet of heavy white paper and a fountain pen Ellen had given me on my 60th birthday. I wrote slowly, carefully, the way I used to draft building plans. Caitlin and Jeremy, if you're reading this, then you've discovered the locks have been changed. The house is no longer yours to enter because it was never yours to begin with. I heard you. Every word. The burden talk. The nursing home plans. The dollar figures attached to my life's work. You forgot one thing: this house was built by my hands and paid for with my sacrifice. And I decide where it goes. It's sold. $890. The money is secure and you will never see it. Your belongings have been packed and stored at Denver Moving and Storage. You have 30 days to claim them. For 42 years I gave you everything I had. You repaid me by plotting to erase me. Consider this the invoice for that betrayal. Dad. I read it twice, adjusted 2 words, then sealed it in a white envelope. I wrote their names on the front in large, neat letters. This wouldn't just be an explanation, it would be the final blueprint of a lesson. Monday morning, I drove to Denver Moving and Storage. For a cash fee, they agreed to pick up Caitlin and Jeremy's personal items from the house and hold them. I gave specific instructions: clothing, electronics, personal paperwork, yes. My own things, Ellen's keepsakes, untouched. The crew worked quickly. By noon, the items were gone, stacked neatly in their warehouse, tagged with a number I alone had the receipt for. By Tuesday evening, everything was in place. The camera was armed and linked to my phone. The note was taped to the inside of the front door, right at eye level. The house was bare of their things. The locks were changed. All that remained was the waiting. Wednesday, I moved the essentials into my new apartment. Ellen's jewelry box on the dresser, the wedding photo on the nightstand, her cookbook in the kitchen drawer. It didn't feel like home, not yet, but it felt safe. Mine. I sat on the balcony that night, the city lights glowing in the distance. Somewhere out there, Caitlin and Jeremy were in Phoenix, laughing over dinners paid for with company cards, completely unaware that their return home would be anything but welcoming. Thursday, I checked the camera feed twice, ensuring it was still active. Every time I saw that empty entryway, I felt a strange anticipation, like a fisherman watching a still line in the water. Friday, the day of their return, I woke early, brewed coffee, sat in the living room chair by the window phone in hand. The timestamp on the app ticked over to 4:00 p.m. I knew their habits. Caitlin would leave Phoenix just after noon. Jeremy would drive exactly the speed limit. They'd pull in by 5:15. At 5:12, the motion alert buzzed in my hand. I opened the app. There they were, the black SUV pulling into the driveway. Caitlin stepping out first, smoothing her skirt, smiling at Jeremy. He hauled their suitcases from the back, the picture of a man confident in what awaited him. They walked to the door. Caitlin pulled her key from her purse, inserted it, turned. Nothing. She tried again, jiggling the lock. Her head tilted in confusion. Jeremy came forward, took the key, tried it himself. His shoulders tensed. He walked toward the back of the house, out of the camera's view, and returned 3 minutes later, face tight. All the locks are changed, I heard him say through the app. Caitlin's voice wavered. That's impossible. And then she noticed the envelope. Her hand reached for it. My heart beat once hard. This was the moment. Caitlin's fingers trembled as she peeled the envelope from the door frame. Jeremy leaned over her shoulder, his jaw tight. Through my phone's screen, I saw her glance at the handwriting, that neat, deliberate script she'd seen on birthday cards and high school permission slips her whole life. She tore it open. Her eyes darted across the page. The moment she reached the sentence, "I heard you." Every word, her expression changed. Shock first, then disbelief, then something darker, the recognition that she'd been caught. "Oh my God," she whispered. Jeremy grabbed the paper from her hand, scanning quickly. His mouth twisted. He sold it. He sold the damn house. I leaned back in my apartment chair, sipping my coffee, letting the sound of those words sink in like music. The feed's microphone picked up every ragged breath, every sharp edge in their voices. Caitlin's voice cracked. He can't just... Yes, he can, Jeremy snapped. It's in his name. Always has been. Her eyes widened. The money. Gone. In his account. Untouchable. He shook the paper at her. And he's dumped our stuff in storage. She stared at him as if she'd just realized she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Jeremy, our lease is up next week. We were counting on. Yeah, I know what we were counting on. He paced the entryway like a caged animal. But clearly your father was counting too, and he counted us out. The irony almost made me laugh. Here was the man who told her I was a burden, now looking at her like she was the problem. They moved further into the house, my house, though no longer legally mine, and sat heavily on the living room sofa. The furniture would be gone within 48 hours when the movers came for the new owners. For now, it still carried the imprint of 25 years of life, and the comfort they believed they had claimed to. Caitlin dropped her head into her hands. How could he do this? He's my father. Jeremy's reply came cold. The same way you were ready to put him in a nursing home. He just beat us to the punch. Her head snapped up. Don't turn this on me. You were the one who said. I said we couldn't keep supporting him if he became a danger to himself. You're the one who started calculating what his house could sell for. Through the phone, I watched the cracks widen. Their voices overlapped old grievances spilling out like water from a burst dam. You're unemployed, Jeremy. And you lied about why you were fired, she hissed. Do you think I didn't notice the savings draining every month? He scoffed. You spend like we've already inherited half the world. Designer handbags, weekend getaways. Those trips were to keep investors interested. Oh, please. Investors don't care about wine tastings in Napa. She went quiet for a beat, then said, if we'd just acted sooner. Caitlin the man was sharper than both of us. He played along until he had every piece in place. And now, he gestured toward the note still clutched in his hand. Now we're the ones locked out. They sat in silence for a long moment. I could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, Ellen's gift to me, on our 15th anniversary still marking time, in a house that no longer belonged to any of us. Finally, Caitlin's voice dropped to a near whisper. Do you think he'll forgive us? Jeremy laughed without humor. Not after this. Not after he went to the trouble of writing this little masterpiece. He waved the note again, then read aloud mockingly. Consider this the invoice for that betrayal. He shook his head. Your dad's got a mean streak when he wants one. I almost smiled. He wasn't wrong. Caitlin rose, suddenly pacing toward the bay window Ellen had loved. We have to find him. We can't just let him disappear. Jeremy leaned back on the couch. And what's your plan when we do? Ask for the money. You think he'll hand over a dime after what we said? She turned hands on her hips. We'll tell him we were worried about him. That we didn't mean it the way it sounded. Jeremy arched an eyebrow. You think he's that gullible? Her lips pressed into a thin line. He's my father. He loves me. I could almost feel the sting in that sentence. Love the thing she'd traded for a real estate transaction. From my apartment, I took another sip of coffee and set the mug down. It was time to end the show. They'd read the script. They'd played their parts. And now they'd sit in that hollow shell of a home until they realized there was nothing left to cling to. I closed the app. The camera had done its job. The rest would play out without me watching. That evening, I opened a bottle of Ellen's favorite Bordeaux. I'd kept it for years, always waiting for an occasion that never came. Now seemed fitting. I poured a glass and raised it toward her photo on the bookshelf. To you, Ellen, I said softly. They thought they could erase me. But you and I both know I built this life with my hands, and I can take it apart just as easily. I took a sip. It tasted like quiet victory. The weekend passed without a word from them. No calls, no visits to my apartment, though I'd taken the precaution of keeping my address private. I imagined them scrambling, calling storage, maybe driving past the bank, hoping to see my truck. Every hour they spent searching was another reminder that they no longer had control. On Sunday, I walked through the park near my new place. The air was crisp, the sky clear. I passed a group of retirees playing chess at a picnic table. One of them looked up and said, "Nice day, isn't it?" "It is," I replied, and I meant it. Monday morning, I visited the bank again. David Morrison greeted me with the kind of smile you reserve for valued clients. "Mr. Hayes, everything's in order," he said. "Your balance is untouched, and your security preferences are all active." "Good," I replied. "I plan to keep it that way." As I left, I realized something. The anger that had fueled me for days was starting to ease. In its place was something steadier, not forgiveness, not yet, but the kind of calm that comes from knowing the fight is over and you won. Back at the apartment, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, sat on the balcony, and looked out over the small park. For the first time in years, the future felt wide open. There would be no one hovering over me, no one making plans for my life without my consent. The house was gone, the money was mine, and the lesson had been delivered. What Caitlin and Jeremy did with that lesson, well, that was their problem now. By Tuesday morning, my phone had collected 4 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. No voicemails. I didn't need caller ID to guess who it was. Caitlin and Jeremy were in damage control mode, reaching out to every possible lead. I let the calls sit unanswered. Part of me was curious what their opening line would be. Part of me didn't care. Either way, they weren't getting a direct path to me. That afternoon, I stopped at the grocery store. As I pushed my cart down the canned goods aisle, I caught sight of Mrs. Patterson from my old street. She was peering into a display of soup glasses halfway down her nose. "Roy," she said, blinking as if I'd stepped out of a memory. "Afternoon, Martha," I replied with a small smile. Her brow furrowed. "I saw some unusual activity at your place last week. Are you moving?" "Already moved," I said simply. She hesitated. "Your daughter stopped by. She looked upset. Said she couldn't get in the house." I kept my expression neutral. Locks change when ownership changes. That's just the way it works. Her mouth opened slightly, but she seemed to sense this was a line of conversation I wasn't going to pursue. "Well, I hope you're settling in." I said and meant it. Back at the apartment, I checked the camera feed one more time. I'd left it running out of habit, though by now it was just picking up empty entryway footage. Still, it gave me comfort to know I could see if they tried again. At 3:42 p.m., the motion alert pinged. Jeremy, alone. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, glancing over his shoulder before trying the door again. When the key failed, of course, he stepped back and looked toward the windows. I could almost see the calculation behind his eyes, but he didn't try to break in. Instead, he pulled out his phone and took photos of the locks, the door frame, even the envelope residue where the note had been taped. Then he left. That evening, I imagined the conversation. Jeremy would show Caitlin the photos, framing them as evidence. They'd convinced themselves I had done something illegal, despite the fact that the law was entirely on my side. Desperation has a way of making people rewrite reality. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the balcony door. The air was cooling fast. Below, a pair of kids rode bikes along the path, their laughter carrying upward. Life continued indifferent to family betrayals. Wednesday morning brought a new tactic. This time, the call came from a local law firm. The receptionist said Caitlin and Jeremy wanted to discuss a family matter. I asked if they had a subpoena. She said no. I told her I wasn't available and hung up. 2 hours later, another call, this one from a blocked number. I ignored it. My coffee tasted better with silence. That afternoon, I visited Denver Moving and Storage. The warehouse manager, a stocky man named Luis, greeted me at the counter. "Mr. Hayes." "No one's been here to claim the unit yet," he said, flipping through his clipboard. "They might show up," I told him. "If they do, remind them they'll need the claim ticket and photo ID." Luis grinned. "Don't worry, we follow the rules here." On my way out, I passed the rows of storage units. Somewhere among them were Caitlin and Jeremy's belongings, the physical proof of their place in my life, now boxed and shelved like old inventory. Thursday, my phone buzzed again with an unfamiliar number. This time I answered. "Dad," Caitlin's voice tentative. "Who's this?" I said evenly. A pause. "It's me. Caitlin, I've been trying to reach you." "I'm aware." "Dad, can we talk face to face? There's been a misunderstanding." I let the silence stretch. "I don't think there's any misunderstanding at all." Her voice cracked. "I was worried about you. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean for me to hear it," I cut in. "Or you didn't mean what you said." Another pause. Then Jeremy and I were stressed. We said things we shouldn't have. I could hear Jeremy in the background muttering something sharp. "Where are you?" she asked. "I'm somewhere I chose. Somewhere peaceful. And that's all you need to know." "Dad, please." I ended the call. That night, I thought about Ellen again, what she'd say if she saw this play out. She'd been the forgiving one between us, always smoothing rough edges. But even she had her limits, and I knew deep down she'd have called this justice. Friday morning, my banker David called to confirm that my account's security settings were active. Any attempt to add signers or authorize withdrawals will require in-person verification from you only, he said. Perfect, I told him. Keep it that way. After I hung up, I opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I felt free to make plans that didn't involve anyone else's agenda. Maybe I'd take a road trip, visit the places Ellen and I used to talk about but never saw. Santa Fe, the Oregon coast, small towns with old diners where no one knew my name. That evening, I walked down to the little cafe Brews and Views. Sarah, the barista with the purple streaks in her hair, waved as I entered. Back again, Mr. Hayes. Best coffee in the neighborhood, I said. She leaned on the counter. You look lighter, I chuckled. Let's just say I recently solved a problem. Well, good for you. She handed me my order. Solving problems is underrated. I carried the mug to a corner table and sat watching the street outside. No Caitlin, no Jeremy, just the hum of ordinary life and the knowledge that their search, wherever it was taking them, had nothing to do with me anymore. When I got home, I unplugged the camera. The show was over. The stage was empty. Whatever moves they made next would happen off-screen, and I preferred it that way. For the first time in a long time, the night felt entirely my own. Saturday morning started quiet the way I liked it. The sun filtered through the blinds and the faint smell of the coffee I'd brewed hung in the air. I was halfway through a crossword puzzle when I heard 3 sharp knocks at my apartment door. Not the polite tap of a neighbor, the kind of knock from someone who's certain they have the right to be there. I set the paper down and opened the peephole. Caitlin. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot strands falling around her face. She looked tired, as if sleep had been optional for the past few nights. Jeremy wasn't with her. I considered not answering, but something in me wanted this chapter closed on my terms. When I opened the door, she stepped back slightly surprised. Dad, she said, relief and tension mixing in her voice. You are here. I leaned against the frame. What do you want, Caitlin? She blinked, caught off guard by the flatness in my tone. I needed to see you. Talk to you. You've had weeks to talk to me. You chose to talk about me instead. Her shoulder sank. I know, I was wrong. I crossed my arms. Wrong about calling me a burden. Wrong about selling my house for your gain. Or wrong about thinking I wouldn't find out. Her eyes glistened. All of it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear a lawnmower in the distance, the clink of dishes from a neighbor's kitchen. Normal life carrying on as if my daughter hadn't just tried to erase mine. She took a step closer. I didn't realize... I knew you'd be hurt, but I didn't think that I'd fight back, I said, cutting her off. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I thought you'd need us, that you'd let us take care of things. I let out a short laugh. Take care of things? You mean take control, package me away in some facility so you could measure curtains for your Boulder house. That's not, she stopped mid-sentence, realizing any defense sounded hollow. Do you know what that house meant to me, Caitlin? I asked, my voice quieter now. Every board, every nail. I built it for your mother and for you. You took your first steps in that kitchen. You opened Christmas presents by that fireplace. And you talked about it like it was a winning lottery ticket you just had to cash in. Her chin trembled. I wasn't thinking. That I said is exactly the problem. She looked down at the floor. I'm not here for the money. I'm not here for the house. I don't want to lose you. I studied her face. She wasn't lying, at least not completely. There was a daughter under all the selfishness, somewhere deep in there. But I'd spent too long giving people the benefit of the doubt. Caitlin, I said slowly, you already lost me when you decided my worth was tied to what you could sell. Her head lifted sharply. So that's it. You're cutting me off. I shook my head. I'm not cutting you off. I'm letting you go. There's a difference. A car horn honked somewhere down the street. She glanced toward the sound, then back at me. Jeremy doesn't know I'm here, she said. He wouldn't have wanted me to come. That's because Jeremy knows exactly where we stand. She hesitated, then asked, will you ever forgive me? The truth was, I didn't know. Forgiveness wasn't a light switch. It wasn't something I could turn on just because she asked for it. It was earned, and she hadn't even started paying for it. Maybe one day, I said finally, but that day isn't today. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. She took a step back as if testing whether I'd call her back. I didn't. I'll leave you my number, she said, reaching into her purse for a small notepad, in case you change your mind. I let her tear the page and hand it to me. The writing was familiar, the same rounded letters from the notes she used to leave on the fridge in high school. I folded it once and slipped it into my pocket. Goodbye, Caitlin. She lingered a moment longer, then turned and walked down the hall. I watched her until she reached the corner and disappeared. When I closed the door, the apartment felt exactly as it had before. She knocked small, quiet, my own. I set the folded note on the counter and went back to my coffee. Part of me felt lighter. Another part felt the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. This was the sober truth that sometimes family breaks, and there's no putting it back the way it was. That afternoon, I called the storage facility. If anyone named Caitlin or Jeremy tries to claim the unit, remember they'll need the ticket and ID. Luis chuckled on the other end. Still safe, Mr. Hayes. Good, I said. Keep it that way. That night, I sat on the balcony as the sun dropped behind the buildings. I thought about Ellen, about what she'd say if she'd been there when Caitlin knocked. She'd probably tell me I did the right thing. That love doesn't mean letting someone take advantage of you, that sometimes the best way to protect yourself is to draw a line they can't cross. I sipped my coffee and watched the last streaks of orange fade from the sky. For the first time since all this began, I felt not just in control, but at peace. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of stillness you only notice after a storm. The past weeks had been nothing but movement contracts, signed locks, changed storage, arranged confrontations had. Now, for the first time, the day stretched in front of me with no urgent tasks, no looming deadlines, and no knocks I dreaded. I made coffee and stood by the window looking out over the small park beyond the balcony. The same two retirees were on their usual bench tossing crumbs to the pigeons. A young couple walked past their toddler, tugging at the leash of a patient golden retriever. Life went on unaffected by the quiet war I'd just fought and won. After breakfast, I decided to take a drive. No destination, just the open road. I pulled my truck from the apartment's small lot and headed west, letting the city fade in the rearview mirror. The mountains rose in the distance, snow still clinging stubbornly to the peaks. Ellen had loved the mountains. She'd always talked about retiring somewhere with a view of them, a porch swing where we could drink our coffee together. I couldn't give her that in life, but I could at least give her the peace of knowing I was living by my own terms now. I stopped in a small town an hour outside Denver. Main Street was just 4 blocks lined with weathered storefronts. I found a diner called the Summit Grill and slid into a corner booth. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, poured me coffee without asking. Passing through, she asked. Maybe I said with a small smile. Or maybe I'm staying for lunch. While I ate, I thought about Caitlin, about the look on her face when she stood in my doorway asking if I'd forgive her. The old me, the man before Ellen died, would have caved, would have let her in, made excuses for her behavior, told myself she was just under stress. But that man had been burned, and this version of me knew better. Forgiveness, if it came at all, would have to be earned over time and on my terms. For now, I was content with distance. Distance protected the boundaries I'd fought to put in place. Back in Denver that afternoon, I stopped at Colorado Community Bank. David greeted me in the lobby. Mr. Hayes, how's everything? He asked. Smooth, I replied. I wanted to ask about a certificate of deposit, something that locks the funds in for a year. He nodded. We can set that up right now. As we went through the paperwork, I thought about how different this felt compared to when Caitlin and Jeremy handled anything involving money. This was quiet, secure, mine. When I left the bank, I had the CD receipt in my wallet. It wasn't just a financial move, it was a statement this money, like my future, was untouchable. Monday morning, I took a walk to Brews and Views. Sarah was behind the counter, pulling a shot of espresso. You're becoming a regular, she teased. Best coffee in town, I said. She leaned closer. You look lighter than last week. Because I am, I said simply. She grinned. Well, keep doing whatever you're doing. It's working. That afternoon, I sat at my small dining table with a notepad. I started writing a list, not of chores or repairs, but of things I wanted to do, now that I was free from the weight of someone else's expectations. Drive to the Oregon coast, see the Grand Canyon, learn to make Ellen's lemon meringue pie without burning it, take a photography class, maybe, just maybe, adopt a dog. The list grew longer, and for the first time in years, it wasn't about surviving, it was about living. Midweek, a letter arrived at my apartment. No return address, but I knew the handwriting immediately. Caitlin's. Inside was a single sheet. Dad, I know I hurt you. I know you don't owe me anything. But I want to try to make this right. I don't expect an answer soon, maybe not ever. But I want you to know I'm sorry. Love, Caitlin. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in Ellen's jewelry box. Not because I was ready to forgive, but because some part of me wanted to remember this moment proof that maybe she understood the cost of her choices. Friday, I packed an overnight bag. I'd booked a small cabin 2 hours away, perched on a ridge with a view of the mountains, just me, the quiet, and a chance to think about what came next. Driving out of the city, I felt no urge to look back. I'd already left the past behind when I turned that key in the new lock for the last time. The road ahead was mine alone. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I sat on the cabin's porch with a mug of tea. The sky burned orange and gold, fading into deep blue. Somewhere below, a creek murmured over rocks, the sound blending with the cool wind in the trees. I raised my mug toward the horizon. "Ellen, we did it," I said softly. "They won't put me away. They won't take what we built." The air was cold, but I felt warm all the way through. When I drove back to Denver the next day, I didn't go anywhere near my old neighborhood. That house was someone else's now, and I had no interest in haunting it like a ghost. My home was wherever I chose to be, and right now, that was my apartment, my bank, my coffee shop, my park. For the first time in a long time, my life wasn't shrinking. It was expanding. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I typed out a short letter not to send, but to keep for myself. A final page to close this chapter. I am not a burden. I am not an asset to be sold. I am Roy Hayes. I built my life with my own hands, and I will spend the rest of it on my terms. The people who understand that will be welcome in it. The ones who don't, won't. I printed it and tucked it into my desk drawer, a reminder should I ever doubt again. The next morning, I went for a walk. The park was alive with kids playing tag, couples walking dogs, an old man feeding ducks. The sky was a perfect blue, the kind Ellen would have called a porch-sitting day. I found an empty bench and sat down, breathing in the cool air. I didn't know exactly where the road ahead would take me, but for the first time since I'd lost Ellen, I was ready to find out. And that's how it ended. Not with me in a nursing home, but with me holding the keys to my own future. They thought I'd roll over and let them take everything. Instead, I walked away with my life, my money, and my freedom all on my own terms. If you've stuck around to the end, thanks for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that no matter your age, you're never too old to take back control. Before you go, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next tale I've got to share. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my shoes? Until next time, this is Roy Hayes signing off.